Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Getting on here late. I am tardy. Everybody's going to be mad at me. It's 58 after the hour. Typically, I'm about 10 minutes earlier than this. But hey, better late than never. And we made it by the top of the hour. This is WeatherBrains episode. What is this? This is number 890. Yeah, buddy. This is the show for weather dweebs, geeks, nerds, dorks, weenies. Let's bring everybody in here. This is the pre-show, the magical time of the program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say very outrageous things. And we've only got 1 minute before we hit television, so we almost have no time to say anything outrageous. Sorry I'm late, guys. I'm typically 10 minutes earlier than this. That is my fault. It is all my fault.
I jumped out. I thought something was wrong.
No, it's like, there was a software update on one of the programs I use. I use a program called Loopback, which is an audio virtual routing program. It's like a patch panel, except it's virtual. And for some reason, the new update, it turned all of the pipes off by default. And so what is going on here? They weren't showing up, but you have to go in there.
You always wait till Monday night to start trying new software and getting updates. And
yeah, no, that's. See, I live on the edge. That's what you do here on the show. You live on the edge. So we hit television here in 3 seconds. So we would like to welcome all of you on the television side. It's Monday night. It's WeatherBrains time. So, all right, let's see.
Don't forget Midland's joining us tonight, James. I don't know if that's going to throw you off.
Do I need to
pull any? I don't think they had any
graphics or anything.
I don't think so. Just be ready with the James Fan special at the end.
All right. I think everybody's here, so let's just get right into it. And again, I apologize for the tardiness. So is Weather Band off or are they on?
Oh, they're still on.
Okay. All right. So here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
WeatherBrains episode number 890. This is for Monday, the 6th of February, 2023. Thank you so much for joining us. It's the Monday Night Weather Party. We are live on YouTube. We know most of you listen later, which is cool. Let's see. Jen Naramore, good to have you back. We missed you last week.
Hi, missed you guys. I'm excited this week because I get to meet in person my weather hero. And I'll even step onto the campus of Ohio State to do it. So I'm very excited.
So, and hopefully after she meets her weather hero, she'll come and talk with me.
Dave, you don't count.
Yeah, that's right.
You are yesterday, man.
Yeah.
No. I am done. No, I'm looking forward to it. I'll be speaking at Ohio State University on Friday at their symposium. That'll be a lot of fun. So, Jen, we're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be a great day. So how you been? You doing okay?
Doing good. Yep. Hanging in there. Yep.
Good. All right. So let's go down to Troy, who's just had a lot of issues. Troy, just talk to us. We're here to listen to your problems. On this show, we wear our heart on our sleeve. So just air it out. Go.
Are you still on generator power?
No, I'm not on generator power, but I'm waiting for the damn locust to arrive. So,
show title, and we got a show title right off the bat.
I am waiting for that. No, the generator. Thank you, Generac. I don't think they're one of our official sponsors, but the generator ran for 3.5 days. Didn't miss a lick. The neighbors all hate me. But other than that, and other things around Austin, I have never just this last week. I'm through with it. So
how bad was it?
It's bad. You don't have to walk 15, 20 feet this way. We have debris piled up on the curbs. And it'll take, I think, 2 to 3 months before they can get this all out of here. And that would be 2 or 3 weeks if it was anywhere but the city of Austin, which couldn't find its way. They could screw up a rock fight. Let's put it that way. So it's just not good right now. I mean, and we still have 20,000 people without power in the city, and they say it may be next Sunday before they can be restored. They're blaming the weather again. Our wonderful people at Austin Energy blamed the weather, by the way, last week. We didn't know it was going to be that bad. Well, guess what? The National Weather Service, Austin, San Antonio, had 1/4 to 1/2 inch ice accumulation. You know what? They were exactly right. And if Austin Energy can't read, that's their personal problem. They need to figure out, get somebody that can read a National Weather Service forecast, and they wouldn't be surprised. I want to see heads roll at the Austin Electric Utility, and I think I will. So
I'm
really,
jotting
really
down
bad.
I'm jotting down the show titles as quickly as I can. They could
the
screw
locust,
up a
the
rock
locust thing,
fight.
I like the locust thing. So I like
They're
that.
waiting on the locust to arrive, and they
Yeah.
could screw up a rock
Yeah.
fight. I
Yep.
mean,
Yep.
wow.
And then
s-
we'll talk about it later. But then last night or Saturday morning, we had the incident out at
Yeah.
Austin Bergstrom International
How
Airport.
how did this happen?
Okie James will keep me from doing this too far, but I think the blame is squarely on the FAA. The NTSB is in town. They arrived today. There's a lot of, I talked to people out at FAA today. There was a lot of pucker factor going on out there today, but NTSB will do a good job with this, and as they always do, in my opinion. But that one, I will tell you that I heard from people high in the government who said it was that close to Tenerife. And you
Oh,
go
boy.
back 44 years with that one. The only thing that would be any different in this case, it would have been 120 people killed. Then it was 582, I think, killed in the
Oh,
crash.
geez.
747s, about the same kind of situation on a foggy day in Tenerife and a very foggy day here in Austin on Saturday morning.
And I've got on my paper here a lot of pucker factor is a third show title possibility.
I'm serious. I think the NTSB has arrived in town, and so that's all I'll say. That's what I understand.
So, Dr. Neil Jacobs, do you have a rant you'd like to go on? This is good. Go. Take it.
No, I've got nothing. Everything seems to be going all right. I was out working on my porch, and Kim starts texting me. She's like, "You're missing an email discussion on UFOs."
Yeah.
That's
What's
the
this
best
about a
one of all
balloon?
time.
Yeah.
That answer, Dr. Neal, just absolutely took the cake. Because we had all dreamed up the very worst possible thing. And what's the principle when it's probably the most simple thing?
Reflections.
In the whole bill? Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just
reflection.
headlights,
Reflections.
camera. But what do you
Yeah,
call
look-
that? That has a name. The principle when it's the simplest thing. You said it before.
Oh, Occam's razor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Occam's right. That's it.
Bless you.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
disappointed. I wanted aliens so bad, but
I wanted aliens so bad as another show title potential
you
here.
go.
I
I
mean,
like that
I've got a treasure trove right here. So let's see. I know that Rick is out tonight, and don't think Kim is on yet. Kim is battling. I say battling. That's not the right word. She is handling family chores right now, probably. And she tends to join us a little late these days. So let's see. Bill Murray, just take it away. Go.
Yeah, James. We got a fun show tonight.
Oh, wait. Time out. James A is on here. Let's go to Tulsa. I'm
what
sorry,
in the
Bill.
world?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
How in the world could I didn't see James on the list. I got on here late. This is my problem. I'm discombobulated. But James A, I see you're on the line with us. Give us an update on. Do you have any rants that you'd like to go on, please?
Go for it. Jay.
Much quieter than Austin, thankfully. But yeah, pretty quiet. The sleet and snow last week has moved on, and I kind of agree with Neil. I was hoping we would have UFOs as the culprit, but reflections off glass can really be a pain.
I got it. See, some people will get that later when they go home. I got that one immediately.
I'll apologize now.
No, and for those that don't know, we're talking about a viewer sent me this security camera video or some type of camera video of these lights kind of coming through the sky, and is it space junk? I mean, what's going on here? So Dr. Jacobs immediately gave us the disappointing answer, but the truth always wins. So, all right, Bill Murray, take it away. Go.
Yeah, James, I was all excited there for a minute. Jen started talking about she's going to meet her weather hero. She might even step on the campus of Ohio State to do it. I thought she meant you, John Bangoff. I thought that's who her new hero was, but no, it's the great span for sure. John Bangoff, though, is a meteorologist at the National Weather Service in State College, Pennsylvania. He was on with us back just a few shows ago. Show 877. Those numbers still boggle my mind every time we say them, back on November 8th. But he was there talking about something we'll also talk more about tonight when he was getting ready for Snow Squall Awareness Week. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. James, I forgot that you were going to be live from the campus of The Ohio State University, my alma mater. So I hope you have a great time. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be there in person. My sister is a huge Carrie Underwood fan. And Carrie Underwood is coming live to the Bryce Jordan Center this Friday night. And so when I found out the date of the symposium, I'd much rather be there in Columbus.
No. I cannot compete with Carrie Underwood. That will never be a thing. So
we're going to have
totally
a heck of a time, and I'll be watching virtually. And I'll reserve all my Ohio State fandom to my fellow Penn Staters that I have the pleasure of working with on a daily basis here in Happy Valley. So,
hey, Jen, Jen, take a look. Yeah, look at that. Product placement.
Exactly.
I see it.
So how long is this thing you're coming to, James? Is it only Friday night? Does that excuse Mr. Bangoff from missing Saturday?
It's a 1-day gig. I think it's a 1-day symposium. So it's Friday evening.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I couldn't be both places and drive the 5 hours to get back for the concert. So I'll just watch from here, unfortunately.
I was going to say, otherwise, Span would be over in the front row of the Carrie Underwood concert, and y'all would lose him. But John, it's great to have you. It's something we were talking a couple of months ago because we share a lot of the same sports fandom. Remind me of our conversation. We got into the Braves. I know we got into some other stuff.
Braves is the primary thing. You guys are talking about all sorts of trivia. I was born in Atlanta, huge Atlanta Braves Tomahawk chopper, and grew up watching Glavine and Maddox and Smoltz and Bobby Cox and all that stuff. So came up a little bit short this past year, but certainly enjoyed the 2021 World Series run. That was a heck of a time.
That was pretty fun, and those years in the 90s were a lot of fun too. So
can't beat it.
That's some good stuff. But John has brought some friends along with him tonight. Greg DeVore is the lead meteorologist at Weather Service State College, 30-year veteran, NOAA's National Weather Service duty stations all over the CONUS, from Yakima to Boise to La Crosse to Washington, D.C. He's passionate about winter storms and also about winter weather forecasting. He grew up in Northeast Massachusetts and understandably came to that result, but he researches and specializes in the prediction of banded heavy snowfall and snow squalls. And his wife and teenage daughters tolerate his weather or fleet. I mean, how many of us are like that? I mean, I think all of us can probably say that. Odd working hours, shares love of Penn State, New England. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Bill, I know we share our love of snow. I read your bio as well. And Jen, I was horrified for a second to think that John Bangoff was your weather hero.
I was thinking, she is being so rude to our other guests. What is wrong with this girl?
We just realized John and Brutus Buckeye have they're very similar looking. The most prominent part is that big head. And I don't know that he'd be able to get in the door if it was any bigger. So anyway, James, I take it you are her hero, and that's wonderful news.
For this week. You never know about next week.
As John said in the chat, a glimpse into the day of his life.
Oh, man.
We love John. He actually would feel left out if we weren't picking on him. So.
Well, I was going to say he got picked on a show here 2 weeks ago, and I wouldn't say it was picked on. It sounded like collegial jealousy. But apparently the folks in Birmingham still got some hurt feelings that you didn't come south, John. Is that something we talk about, or was it the NIL money? Was it what was the deal?
Exactly. Yeah, Penn State gave me a deal that I couldn't pass up. So here I am. I'm a little bit disappointed. I didn't think I have a Brutus Buckeye Build-A-Bear. It's like a little stuffed animal to Brutus, and it has become the office punching bag over the years, hanging from a noose inside of a trash can, all sorts of stuff, and it's fun. Now, I'll say I asked for it, by wearing my obnoxious Ohio State stuff into the office, and been known to bring in my national championship ring from 2014 occasionally. So we have a whole lot of fun, and I've come to say if you're not being harassed, you're not relevant. My therapist, I think, might have told me that at some point back in the day, but we have a whole lot of fun.
You can still get in the transfer portal, right?
Yeah, that's true. Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, that 2014 season didn't end so well for Alabama and New Orleans against Ohio State, and all insult to injury, I ended up in the elevator with the big nut at the Holiday Inn Superdome after the game was over, and I thought, there is poetic justice here.
Even I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, he's a super fan, that's for sure.
That is for sure, John. So anyway, Greg, thank you so much. It's awesome to have you here tonight. We'll talk more in just a minute about. I'd like to hear about your career journey and a little bit about about your career path. And I worked really hard to get the pronunciations right. Michael Jerwitz, Science and Operations Officer with Weather Service and State College, 33-year veteran, duty stations within the Northeast U.S., Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, PA, Binghamton, New York, and State College. Fun fact about Michael: he issued the first ever snow squall warning in the Weather Service. So that's something that you can put on the wall there and remember. Main professional jams are training and transitioning the latest greatest research and techniques into operation. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's definitely an honor to be here. And by the way, John's exact quote is, if you're not ridiculed, you're not relevant. And so we oblige him every day just to make him feel welcome.
Well, Michael, we're glad you're here. We won't ridicule you tonight unless John does some ridiculing. He's probably known for doing some of that back. Dr. Kim Cloko-McLean, you got introduced in your absence, but it's good to have you here in person now.
Great to be here with you guys. Thanks for introducing me before I showed up. Putting the baby down, you never really know how that's going to go until the process has completed, but I'm glad to be with you all.
Yeah, we've already given Dr. Neal a little heck for his Occam's razor solution to our beautiful problem that we had from the video earlier. It was kind of a downer, but he was absolutely right once again.
Yeah, kind of a downer, but you can count on Neal for bringing the reality to us, even if it's not as fun as the aliens that we were all hoping for.
Yeah, that was for sure. So, Mike, take us for a second through your career path real quick. We always like to hear how our friends in the business got started, and what propelled them along their way. So, spend a little time, take us on your journey.
Okay, so I was a kind of like John. I'm in a little bit enemy territory in State College. I was a Rutgers grad. As John gets animosity, I get pity. But a Rutgers grad, and then my Weather Service career began back in 1989. Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. I was there as an intern for about 5 years. Went up to Binghamton, New York, and got promoted eventually as senior forecaster. I was in Binghamton for a long time, more than 20 years. And I was lucky enough to get a gig as the Science and Operations Officer in State College back in 2018. And doing a lot of things I love with science training and research. So life is good down here at State College.
Yeah. Talk about this cold snap we had this weekend in New England, Michael. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was very impressive. And luckily, it came in handy for us down in Pennsylvania, tight gradients. It was far, far worse, not that far north of us than it was for us in PA. I mean, wind chills were pushing, I think, minus 50 Fahrenheit at times in northern New England for our colleagues up in Portland and Caribou. But like the cold snap we had around Christmas, it was pretty short-lived. So the cold air gets flushed down for a few days, and then it gets zipped right out. So it didn't really stick around long.
I saw minus 24 at Watkins Glen. was the record, and I'm sure there were even crazier numbers. Did y'all were y'all watching a little more closely than I was at some of the records? What was the most impressive number besides the 109 wind chill at negative wind chill at Mount Washington?
Oh yeah, well, Mount Washington's given. I think the lowest air temperature I saw, I think I might have seen a minus 39 or minus 40 somewhere in northern Vermont, maybe
I
northern.
think it bottomed out at minus 47 with a wind speed of like 96, equating to like minus 108 or 109. I'm pretty sure, setting the all-time record. So would not have wanted to be there whatsoever. We locally, I think we got wind chills maybe like a couple degrees below zero. Some of our northern zones got down to like minus 15 or so. We did have a wind chill advisory, but certainly, as Mike J alluded to, the worst of it was northeast of us, and we're not too disappointed to have missed out on the jackpot this time around.
Well, Greg, I covered a lot of your history there and in your CV, talking through your history. But talk about how you got interested in weather and what made this the career of choice for you.
Well, I think it's fitting that today is February 6th, and February 6th, 1978 was probably the formative weather event of my childhood. I was 8 years old, and
the Boston blizzard. Yeah.
Okay. We missed a whole week of school, 3 feet of snow. I'm in the coastal inundation with, just 3 to 4 feet of slush and homes lost. And it was just an epic storm. And I was always awestruck by that. And I was also waiting for the next time I'd miss a week of school. So
this is an every year occurrence, right?
Yeah. I wanted to know when the next big one was coming. So I started paying attention and kind of grew to love watching the Weather Channel and just keeping up to date on what was happening. And nothing else really fascinated me to that degree. I was involved in music and other things that I loved, but weather just became my occupation. And so, I went to Penn State, got to play in the marching band and have meteorology here, and then got fortunate to get a job in the Weather Service and started in Yakima, Washington. It was an ag office. Got to meet a lot of the fruit growers out there, and also met a lot of my family. I was raised in Massachusetts, but my family goes back to Portland and Washington. And around the turn of the century, actually, my grandfather lived on a fruit orchard just outside of town. So I actually met relatives that I'd never met before. It was really cool. But yeah, I wanted to move back east. So I went to Washington, D.C. Didn't like living there. Bounced around again, Boise, fire weather forecasting there, lacrosse, and then back to State College. And have built a home here for the last 20 years. And, found out that we really don't get blizzards here in Central PA, nothing that lasts a day or two. So I kind of focus on, brief periods of blizzard conditions that last on the order of minutes.
Yeah. So those are what we're going to talk about tonight for sure. Take us back to 1978. How was the forecast for that blizzard?
As I recall, unusually good. There were signs 2 to 3 days in advance that this was going to be a big one. And I remember, back then they're drawing maps and showing them on TV and Don Kent, and then we lost power. And I remember listening on the radio. I was just fascinated by the whole thing and the whole idea that the world just stopped, for that period of time. And again, we just had snow, and we were all we had to do was clear it. So we were very fortunate, but it was just very memorable for, 8-year-old boy, snow over your head and missing school for a week. And that was really where I grew my fascination and love for the weather, and just it only grew from there.
So how old were you then, Greg, in 1978? Not today.
Just turned eight years old, so second grade.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was growing up in that period of the 70s. Even prior to Normal Weather Radio, we're going to have Bruce Jones join us a little bit later tonight and talk about that valuable resource. But in 1976, that was my entire world, pre-Weather Channel, pre-James Spann, pre any kind of weather information at all. NOAA Weather Radio was, a godsend in Central Alabama in 1976, and we loved it forever. Still love it to this day, obviously. But then it was something even more important than just a warning tool. It was a real resource of weather information. So that's pretty cool. But we're glad you're with us tonight. And John, I'm sure we got into your career and how you got started the last time, but let's go back over it again, or talk about it if we didn't have time to get to that.
Yeah, so born in Atlanta, Georgia. My parents lived down there. Moved up to Ohio when I was 3. So can't really say that I was raised in Georgia, but became a Braves fan from a very young age, and they were great through the 90s. My love of weather started probably when I was 8 or 9 years old. We had a pop-up camper. We'd go camping every summer. A group of maybe 10 or 15 families from church. So we'd have our caravan. It'd be so much fun. There was one particular summer, I can't remember what year it was, but we were under multiple active tornado warnings, a couple different trips. I remember being in a camper, just being fascinated as you run into the bathhouses, seeing, the circulations. And I don't think a tornado ever touched down nearby, but just sort of was in awe of the power of the atmosphere. And Jim Ganal was a local TV meteorologist who's still going after 50 some years in Central Ohio. He sort of was a guy that I was fascinated by. Then I picked up a love of mowing the grass, middle school. And so loved being outside and loved just the wonder of the weather, right? And so I thought, man, that's what I want to do. In high school, I sort of thought that being, on TV was the main thing that meteorologists did. And I was a big science and math nut. So I was like, maybe I want to do engineering. I'm not sure I want to do meteorology. So I actually paid my acceptance fee to Ohio State and Purdue. Saw a Purdue Boilermaker shout out there because I just wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I ended up deciding to go to Ohio State mainly because I wanted to be in the marching band at Ohio State, play trumpet, and ended up being in the band for 5 years there. But anyway, started in engineering fall quarter my freshman year. 2 weeks into class, I was looking at majors and came across this peculiar thing called atmospheric science. I'd searched for meteorology degrees, and Oklahoma and Penn State and things like that came up, but I didn't even know Ohio State had a meteorology degree. And as I was reading, the rest was history. I was 2 weeks into my engineering quarter, and I said, nope, I'm going to change over to meteorology. So swapped over. Had some incredible opportunities through undergrad to volunteer, at the Weather Service down in Wilmington, work at the ABC6 Fox affiliate in Columbus for a summer. Then got to go down to Atlanta for my Howlings internship my junior into senior year, working on tornado debris signatures. And that's where I really kind of came to see, man, the Weather Service would be a blast to be a part of. Still wasn't totally sure where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. Did some work with emergency management in Columbus, and then worked for the Columbus Crew soccer team, doing on-site weather support for the summer, which is where I fell in love with the realm of on-site weather support, which I've continued to do to this day. But decided to ultimately go to Penn State for grad school. Similar Big Ten school close to home. I think had I realized that Penn State had such vitriol for my alma mater, I might have, made a different choice, but had a blast. I mean, it's been so much fun. Was fortunate to volunteer here through grad school, and then for whatever reason, they decided to hire me full-time. And so been here now full-time for almost 5 years, in total coming up on 7, being involved with the office. And it's just been so much fun. My main interests are on-site weather support. We do the Little League World Series and Flight 93 National Memorial. There's a music festival down south of here as well that we're involved with. And really just the outreach education piece. And that's where really the snow squall awareness effort has come full circle, just partner interaction and all sorts of things like that. So I have really enjoyed just what the journey's been. Would not have expected to still be here, but I met my wife a few years ago. We now have a 4.5-month-old daughter. So Kim, I'm also navigating the unpredictability of bedtime and all the fun that comes with that. But man, it's been a blast, and just thrilled to have had so many really cool opportunities over the years through my short career thus far.
Yeah, Dr. Clucko McLean, everything okay over there in Oklahoma? It looks like things are getting rough. What's going on?
What do you mean by rough? Things rough. My husband handed me, he found a train. Everything's represented. Mega Thomas.
So are your kids train fans, Kim? It appears.
Are they fans of what, Thomas?
Of trains.
Trains.
Thomas.
Yes.
Just
yes.
Thomas
We love all manner of transportation conveyances in this house, but yeah, trains are probably a number one, which it makes my Purdue heart very happy. But they did see me walking around with this little schooner guy, and that almost caused a world war, that they couldn't have it. So you're lucky to see me here with it right now. And yeah, we're having a good time over in this house. Everything's fine.
They're like the meme with the picture of the dog sitting with all the house burning down around him.
Mhm.
Sounds kind of familiar. So Don, talk to us about snow squalls for a minute, because we touched briefly on the awareness week. Obviously, that's a very important, critical phenomenon for you guys there in State College, Central Pennsylvania. But this is a serious problem for drivers on highways.
Yeah, so as we talked about last time, it's sort of typical downstream of the Great Lakes. It can also occur in the high plains, or really where there's moisture and some instability. Not too different from maybe a summertime thunderstorm. Greg's done tons of work over the couple decades of kind of raising awareness to these, and we've been sort of the epicenter for pileups here in central Pennsylvania. They don't produce a lot of snow. You're talking maybe half an inch to an inch in a very short time period, and so it's not the amount, it's the intensity. We've seen relatively frequently that if you get the snow coming down hard enough, even if the surface temperatures are upwards of 50 plus degrees before the snow squall hits, as long as the air temperature is below freezing, you can get rapid accumulation on the roads, melts on contact and then refreezes, and the road turns into a sheet of ice. And the issue with that is you can be driving around, it's a sunny day, you see some partly cloudy skies up ahead, going 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, and all of a sudden you're in near zero visibility. You try to hit your brakes, it doesn't work. When you add a bunch of pedestrian and also commercial truck traffic, you end up with a recipe for disaster. And we've seen this just way too many times, and as recently as March of 2022. And so once the snow squall warning was implemented in 2018, we said, hey, this is a great tool, but now we need to try to educate people about it. And that's sort of been the motivation over the past 5 or so years, is continuing to spread the word and make sure people are aware of these, because a snow squall that we're talking about, it's a little semantical, but it's different than just a snow shower, right? Like the flash freeze component, the reduced visibility. There's like, a little rain shower where it's sprinkling, and there's a severe thunderstorm, right? That's kind of the spectrum we're talking about. And central Pennsylvania is sort of the epicenter for it. And so it's been a neat opportunity for us to press in and really try to innovate in a variety of respects as it relates to snow squalls.
So Greg, talk about forecasting these events and warning for them. I was interested to see that one of the channels of the GO satellite is helpful. That day cloud phase distinction RGB product, is that something you use? Talk about the other aspects of forecasting these things.
Yeah, there's we're talking different scales of forecasting, and over the years we went from really not being able to differentiate ahead of time the severity of snow showers to the degree of being able to parameterize how much instability would be available, or if that would be organized by stronger shear into something that would be a more potent banded snow shower / squall. But over the years, our advancements have gone hand in hand with the improvements in numerical model prediction to the point where now we can model the convective mode with cams. And so we have a really good idea of the ingredients that go into these. It kind of goes back to the Doswell days of ingredients-based severe weather. It's very similar to warm season convection. You need moisture, you need wind shear, and you need it to be unstable. And so you get those three things, but you can have a wide spectrum of results with those three things depending upon the distribution of those parameters. And so we've gotten a lot better at anticipating the mode as we've harnessed the new tools. And I do want to mention the other thing with snow squalls is we're talking about instability, but it's really close to the ground. And so instead of a 30,000 foot tall thunderstorm, you're dealing with maybe sometimes a 5,000 foot top. And so you have radar beams that are, only able to sense it to a certain distance out because it's increasing in height with distance away from the radar. So the radar beams can overshoot that at a certain distance. And that's where the satellite comes in, because you can homogenously look at an area and get a sense for cloud tops. And if you know that you're getting quarter mile or less visibility from a particular squall with a certain cloud temperature, you can then extrapolate that to others around. So we're trying to use all observational data sets because of that particular artifact of the radar, and these are very close to the ground. So there's a lot we can talk about as far as forecasting, but really the need is to get the information out quickly to folks. And that's where we pushed really hard to say, hey, we need a tool, we need a warning product that can inform and alert people all at the same time, road crews, public, because it's like severe summertime convection. You need to know right now.
And Greg froze for me there for a second. So
Uh-oh.
it gives me a good opportunity to ask Michael. Michael, you issued the very first one. Talk about the process of getting a snow squall warning into the Weather Service potpourri of warning products.
Yeah, it really was a process, because it took a while really for kind of the groundswell from the field to make it up to headquarters level, and then we had to communicate with the FCC and create a kind of a radio comms niche for this. So it definitely was a several year process to get it to the point where it became an official product. So it's pretty gratifying to us to think of, where we really started with this effort probably 10 plus years ago to where we are now with something that we can hopefully help the public and can avoid some of those just horrific pileups that we've seen the past 3 to 5 years.
What kind of data do you have, like, I guess the spatial granularity of it and the temporal granularity? Like, is there a mesonet? Do you have soil temps? Just thinking of what some of these base data going in are.
Yeah, it's really one of the things that makes snow squalls complex is that you think about warm season thunderstorms and all the atmospheric components that a meteorologist is trying to use to figure out where are storms going to initiate, what mode are they going to take, are they going to become severe, what's this boundary going to do when it interacts, and a lot of the same things are at play with snow squalls, but just on a much smaller scale near the ground, where sometimes data is harder to come by. So we're balancing all of that atmospheric uncertainty, but an additional level with snow squalls is the transportation aspect. So in the summertime, we're just more or less looking at what's going to transpire in the atmosphere. But with snow squalls in the wintertime, we're also trying to translate those developments into what's going to happen on the roadway. How precipitously are the road surface temperatures going to fall? Because we're trying to assess the probability of a flash freeze, which is a term that many of you probably heard. So some of the things that we think about with a snow squall just is not only how hard is it going to snow, for how long, how low is the visibility going to be, but what's the resultant road condition going to be like? Because if it's just going to snow hard for a few minutes, but the road's going to stay wet, there's, the danger factor for travelers is a lot less than if it turns into a sheet of ice. And so we've done a lot of research at our office locally and regionally to try to, and John alluded to this before, to try to determine how do road surface temperatures tend to react when air temperatures are a certain way, when dew points are a certain way, when snow squalls have a certain amount of longevity. So it's a lot of mental gymnastics in a short period of time that you have to assimilate.
Well, and before this talk tonight, I had assumed the visibility was the problem. But so the road freezing is a critical component. And we had our comeuppance about flash freezes around here, James Spann, didn't we, in 2014? We learned really quickly about that.
Yeah, our eye starts to twitch when we think about that day,
It really does. But think about, it was one thing to be stuck on a highway overnight, which is a humanitarian disaster. But, when you're trying to, manipulate this minefield of cars and trucks that suddenly appears, like y'all got a dash cam video on your website that is absolutely harrowing. It looks like something is happening at Talladega. when they're running three abreast on the NASCAR track and something goes wrong. I'd never want to find myself in that situation. So, what sort of advice do you give to drivers? Sort of like we do with tornadoes, just pull off the next exit and wait it out. What do you do?
I guess I could answer this one. This is Greg again. Can you see me all right? I know.
Yeah, now
some
you're
office areas.
loud
Yeah.
and clear, Greg. So keep pedaling faster. Keep the internet going.
Essentially, with a warning that's alerted to your phone, we're saying do not be on the highway. That's the safe place, is not being there. And because basically we can't tell people what to do to stay safe once they're in that situation. If they've been involved in a pileup, do they try to get out of their cars and move off the highway? Yes, in some instances, but the next vehicles piling in can then injure you. It's very situational. Mm-hmm. Say that happens on an overpass. Where are you going to go? You can't hop the railing. We can't tell people, we can't give them the silver bullet what to do once they're in that situation. So first and foremost is there's no safe place on the highway during a snow squall. That's what we want people to know. But as far as safety tips, once you're in it, if you can get away from a pileup, do so. If you can safely exit before you've driven up on or into a snow squall, that's your best bet. If you're not yet on the highway and you receive this, delay travel. Do not get on the highway when we've just issued a snow squall warning. Those are the best safety tips, because basically we want to keep people out of harm's way. And I'm telling it to people in a warning the way I'd tell my wife, don't be on the highway. You do not want to be on the highway when this hits.
Now, Jen, you were sharing a story about Kansas City, and it kind of hit home to me because I never put two and two together. Tell the story you're talking about, because this person that you're talking about being killed in a car accident in Kansas City was Derek Thomas, of course, the famous Alabama linebacker who played for the Chiefs. I never realized that his accident involved weather.
Yeah, it was a heavy burst of snow in snow squalls, and of course when you're doing radio, you only have 30 seconds to try to explain what's happening. And we talked about that, visibility could drop and all that, but the station, because it was so tragic, and the station got me on the air. I was looking it up because I couldn't remember who it was. He died later, but the passengers did die as well. And so they got me live on the air and were really hammering me and questioning me. Did you know? Did you say this? Did you, it was very accusatory, and it was heartbreaking, to talk about. And I said, guys, I did the best I could to try to explain what would happen. But when you're dealing with snows like this and it's accumulating so fast, you have to slow down, and the visibility can drop so low. And so I did the best that I could. It's, obviously it wasn't any meteorologist's fault, but people want to find somebody to blame. And snow squalls are just awful because the visibility can drop so quickly, and it is accumulating so quickly on the roadways. And that was a combination there where it was piling up on the roads and it was real icy. And I think he was heading toward the airport. So it was just, it's ingrained in my brain. And so now when I talk about, I'm so glad that we have this product. And I do a lot I do a station out of Tyrone, Pennsylvania. And so we'll get that, those type of forecasts there. And I will talk about, please slow down. I will use as much time as I can to tell, I don't even give you a high temperature. It doesn't matter. It's all about being safe on the road. And just if that visibility drops, please slow down and, just try to stay off the road if you can. But that was so heartbreaking and scary. It was a scary time to be on the air, to have that direct accusation in your face like that was really hard. So
wow, that's crazy. And I learn something on the show every week, and hundreds of things, and that's something I didn't know. Dr. Coco McLean, you had a question you wanted to raise.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting having this conversation about how much you guys try to put that message forward about what people should be doing, the ideal action. Part of informed decision making and helping people to be motivated to take the right action is also that they understand a little bit what's happening, so they can hear the instruction, not understand what's happening, and just sort of say, I don't get why you even want me to do this, and disregard it. So one of the things that always has interested me about this space and this product is that it's called a snow squall. And, I'm curious if you can all just sort of talk about how you came to decide what it should be called, and if you think that that term is widely understood in its implications.
It's a good question. I I can speak to that. A number of years ago, we were trying to add a certain weather type into our gridded database, and there was kind of agreement among many of the regions in the Weather Service about putting squall in, but there's one region that said people aren't going to know what this is, and so we didn't add that as a specific weather text type. As far as squall is a term that's been used for decades across the north. Across the south, it depends on who you talk to. I think transplants know it, but that's a really good question. Our big key right now, big push now, is we assume that people don't know what a snow squall is. We have not been issuing these warnings before 2018, and so how would they know what a snow squall was? And now we're warning for it and saying this is life-threatening. So we've really, we pushed hard to get this warning product and to have it be able to be delivered to everybody right to their phones with urgency. But we knew the work was just beginning. And that's why this kind of outreach here and all the work, and my hat's off to John Bangoff, his work with social media and bringing people together and communication has really, it's like a snowball going downhill. It's just gathering steam. And it was exactly what we needed at the right time to publicize and educate. And the sky's the limit as far as people understanding it. But so far, we're not there. And that's why I want to keep the pedal down and keep pushing and keep educating however we can.
I want to piggyback off that too, Kim. I think that's been one of our big struggles, is that word and awareness and education about it, because ultimately when we start talking about like a flash freeze, that gets pretty semantical and that's difficult to understand. And I was joking with a buddy the other day because he sent me a picture of a heavy snow shower. I don't even remember where it is, maybe Cleveland or something. And I'm like, that's not a snow squall. That's not a snow squall. That's just a snow squall, right? Like we're kind of getting semantical, and a lot of people think they've driven through a heavy snow shower without the flash freeze, which isn't exactly what we're talking about. And so I do think that education piece is as important, perhaps, of like knowing what it is as the response to it. And I don't know if there's a good answer for it because it's really hard to identify when the road is going to be a sheet of ice, and even meteorologically to predict that. It's very difficult for us to say with confidence this is going to happen. March 28th, 2022 day, that was sort of cellular convection all over the place, whack-a-mole, as we say, where there's 50 to 75 different cells. We're not going to put out warnings on every single one of them. Radar coverage isn't great. How can we possibly alert everybody, notify everyone? So the nomenclature piece is very, very difficult. I'd say at this point, what we're doing is just trying to educate as much as we can, because we know there's a big gap in people's understanding of this. The question, I think, becomes, are we going to be able to advance that education as far as we'd like to, or are people going to get hung up on the nomenclature? I'd venture to say that we are going to continually shoot ourselves in the foot a little bit with the nomenclature, but it's what we got. And as I think about it, I don't know what's better. I'm not sure, right? Like, it's complicated. We are also just had a conversation with Joe Rittberger at University of Oklahoma today, social science survey type stuff, and we're talking about translation to Spanish, right? Like that opens up a whole nother can of worms when snow squalls don't really happen in many Spanish-speaking countries. And so you end up with all sorts of language barriers, and people that are from out of state that are driving through Pennsylvania might get a snow squall warning. So it's an uphill climb for sure in this, and I think it's something we're mindful of. But at this very moment, I think we've sort of come to say that's not anything that's really going to be productive to fight against or push back against. So we'll operate under the conditions we can. But I will say it is something we've thought about a lot, and I don't know what the best solution is other than just to try our best to educate people of what a snow squall, all caps, is, as opposed to maybe what people think is just a snow shower that they feel like a snow squall is. Right? It's very complicated.
Yeah,
if I could just
anything
quickly,
that's obvious. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to piggyback on what John said. The impact-based part of a snow squall. We want to have a different word for that, because it's not just a snow shower. It's a snow shower on steroids with a flash freeze that is life-threatening. Snow shower by itself, it can reduce some visibility, and yeah, you need to be aware and just slow down. A snow squall is a life-threatening situation, and it requires that definition and that understanding and effort on our part to keep spinning this up, because like I said, we didn't have this warning, and suddenly we just have invented this life-threatening situation. No, we realized we had a shortcoming in our ability to communicate short-fused winter weather information, and we needed to do this. And so we're committed to not only having the product, not just pressing the button and saying, oh, you have the warning, stay safe, but teaching people and using the data sets to get better and really target the audience in the best way.
Yeah, you guys are really at this disadvantage with the nomenclature piece, that you're trying to borrow language from severe weather, but things like, snowstorm, it's taken. It's not going to imply the same thing that it does in the convective space. And so, yeah, the nomenclature isn't easy. And I think it's also worth noting that the application for transportation is also not easy. I'm glad that you were plugged into the Weather and Society survey from my colleague Joe Ripberger here at the university. I was curious about that because that's one of the ways you could assess how well the terminology is understood, at least not within an event, but like just in general, if people think that they get it, if they can pick a correct definition off of a list. But something that, it was interesting in the road space, think about the signage you see for winter weather included. Things like bridge may be icy. Like, what does, that doesn't tell you very much, right? And one of my favorite expeditions where I was thinking about signage was going to the AMS annual meeting in 2009. I was driving out there with Gina Esco, who many on this show know and many of our listeners know, a risk communication specialist. She was my roommate at the time. And we got to New Mexico. And if you've never driven through New Mexico on I-40, it is a treat, a veritable buffet of ambiguous weather signage. I think we took pictures of like 10 or 11 different kinds of signs that we did not understand. We're going through and we're just like, should I be like worried? And one of our favorite ones was dust storms may exist. That was a sign. Like, thank you. Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Dust storms exist. Wow, that is fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, sign. And they have like 10 or 11 of these in a row getting into New Mexico. And, it's not an easy task. It's this attempt to sort of suggest you're in a place where there's probably hazards you don't know anything about, and you're coming into it, which is also part of your challenge. You're thinking about people driving through these different places who, maybe they're not native. They've never had occasion to think about this before. And you're trying to convey all of that pertinent information in a WIA, which is very, very short. So yeah, I think that it's a very tough challenge, and I'm glad you guys are clearly thinking about it very deeply. I don't think that there's an easy off the shelf solution to just come in and say, haha. I think it's just really interesting to think about what you have considered. And I think it's important that everyone knows you have thought about that very deeply and came to it after a great deal of consideration and thought. And so the path forward here may very well be, let's just educate and try to ensure that this language gets that recognition and push forward, from this square. So with that, I'll hand you over to James A. for the next pressing question.
Yeah, my question would be, and you talked about there's no good place to be on roads during one of these. How accurate, how fast reacting are Google traffic speed data to indicate that a pileup has happened in front of you? And is it volume dependent? Does it react faster if there's more people reporting slower? I've played around with it on Oklahoma turnpikes, and it's been a little hit or miss, but there's been some successes with it, but didn't know if that was volume based or what experience you guys have had with it.
Sure. Yeah, James, I'll take this one. So let me just kind of provide a little bit of like backstory for this, I guess. The notification piece for snow squall warnings is also really difficult because unless you're driving or about to get on the road, it's irrelevant to you. So from a WIA standpoint, that's been really interesting. This winter is actually the first time we can issue a snow squall warning without a wireless emergency alert, which is super helpful because before we wouldn't issue them overnight, even if conditions warranted, because you don't want to wake up a bunch of people, right? And ideally, you don't want people looking down at their phones when they're driving. And so I think the silver bullet for this is probably displays in vehicles, right? Like newer cars have very advanced dashboards where you can have something that pops up at you. That's the sort of the silver bullet. We're not there yet. But I will say what we have done working with our state partners is done some connecting with Google Maps and Waze and other navigation apps. So as far as like the responsiveness, the traffic volume, I'm not sure. I'll just say anecdotally, when I've used it, like actually just yesterday, I was driving back from Ohio and my wife and I stopped at a rest stop for a little bit, changed daughter's diaper, et cetera, et cetera. And the color of the little rest area road when I got there was green, and by the time I left, it was red. So clearly it's picking up on the fact that I'm stopped there for a little while, right? So in that amount of time, which is maybe 10 or 15 minutes, it had responded. That's just one data point. So I don't know how quickly that, how quickly that updates. But I think it would be necessary that cars that are driving through that stretch have Google Maps open, presumably. I don't know how this works. But I will say one of the things that we've been testing with them, or they've been testing and we're curious to see the results is probably a better way of putting it, are these hard stop alerts. This was something that was proposed. They've got all this data. Hard stops would be able to be sort of recorded and computed and then provide information to the people behind. And the last report I got about a week ago, and I touched base, was since September, Google Maps has issued 5,000 of these hard stop alerts through the winter at various locations. And we don't know the results of that yet. But I am particularly interested in partnering with some of these private sector entities and vendors, both from the commercial vehicle, like truck traffic standpoint, and also just passenger vehicles, to be able to partner with them and get the word out, because I think WEA is going to largely do its job, but I think it could also miss out on some people that are necessary. Some people might have WEA turned off, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think, again, not sure the details of the Google Maps Waze thing, but I think the private sector could be a golden ticket for us in parallel with our other efforts, mainly in the dissemination piece, where I think we as the Weather Service lack or have some limitations in the usefulness of WEA because of a lot of the restrictions that exist. If we can get it in people's vehicles, that's probably going to be the best place for that information to go.
Yeah, so just to piggyback off what John said, I mean, wireless emergency alerts, we've come a long way, and that's a fantastic advancement. But you think about if you're driving alone in your vehicle, we don't necessarily want to encourage people to take your eyes off the road and look at your phone. So I think the most future-minded way to go here is, and John and Greg pretty much said it, is for us to, us as an agency and others too, to work with private industry and get this technology into the vehicle so it can alert the driver, while they're going and they don't have to take their eyes off the road. We're not there yet, but I think that's the ultimate answer.
I've used that software a lot, just driving between Raleigh and DC, and it's never like a weather. It's always just construction or an accident, but it picks up pretty quick if a lot of people are using it. And I think there's some sort of algorithm in there that compares co-located information. So as long as everyone's affected the same way, you're usually pretty safe. But then once it starts to go away, I don't know if you all use this, the Google Maps, and then it puts up this thing like, is the accident still there? And it wants you to respond. I never respond. So I'm probably screwing up their bias correction. But it would be pretty awesome. There's a lot of new cars out there that have sensors on them that can detect road surface temperatures and all sorts of other diagnostics. And if they have it connected to their smartphone, you could be pulling that data off the car. Seems like, just a big shout out to the National Mesonet program. This would be a great vehicle to get that data through into the Weather Service, because I know, at least from the modeling perspective, we could definitely do some pretty cool stuff. Particularly if we had enough information off cars. It's a little bit tricky if you're trying to co-locate stuff that's like one car per hour down some country road, but I think it'd be pretty cool to get that.
Yeah, Dr. Jacobs, I think there's a lot of potential there, a lot more resources, a lot more time and energy that could be spent on this problem. And I think even from like an economic standpoint, I mean, these commercial truck companies, lose a lot of money if they get caught in a pileup and, an interstate shut down for a long time. So I think there's some incentive there, kind of, slight tangent from that. One of the things that we've seen from a mitigation standpoint from these snow squall pileups is you want to slow everybody down, or you want to reduce the amount of commercial truck traffic, because these pileups don't happen on secondary roads. They don't happen when people are going more slowly. And so we've also found some success with these variable speed limit signs that PennDOT has implemented. I think they have like 67 of them that they're testing out across I-80, which is our main probably problem spot, and then also I-81 down in the southeast part of Pennsylvania. But that's seemingly a pretty good, strategy. And I think it can be helpful. The analogy I used at AMS when I was talking about this was, it's kind of like a Sunday afternoon construction zone, right? Like you see the slower speed limit. Maybe I'm the only one, but I don't necessarily stop or, slow down until I see something that like warrants me stopping, especially on a Sunday afternoon. But for a snow squall, you're driving into it, you see that, you're like, well, that's weird. Might be a sunny day, but then all of a sudden you start seeing reduced visibility or snowfall. You're like, oh, that's what I need to do. So slowing people down, I think, can be really helpful. But then the commercial truck traffic, that's a really complicated one. And nobody necessarily asked this, but we've been asked before, why not like shut down the road or like eliminate commercial truck traffic? And I think the difficulty with that is this isn't a synoptic storm. It's not going to affect every single mile of a roadway with great predictability or have significant impacts. It's going to be very short duration. If there's a pileup, it's going to affect the roadway for a really long time. But as far as shutting down the road, that's sort of a non-starter. And so I really think the solution with these commercial companies is perhaps investment in better sensing, like you're talking about, Dr. Jacobs, or at the very least getting connected with some of the vendors that produce the graphics or the content on these in-cab notification systems to be able to get the word out as necessary. And so we as the Weather Service obviously aren't able to do that directly, but if there's any viewers or listeners on here that would have contacts that we could even talk with and just sort of explain the circumstances, I think we'd be more than happy to do that.
And I'm interested, because Neil talked about Google Maps and James A. did too. Waze, its crowdsourced cousin that I think Google also owns now, wants you to put in hazards that you encounter along the highway. And obviously you don't want to do that if you're driving, but if you're the passenger, and certainly the integration into the Apple CarPlay, makes that heads-up display in your car into a very effective way to communicate information, and Waze does that well. I know. The other day when we had dense fog here, there were very reliable notifications that popped up on my, my Apple Car display that said, fog ahead, and the visibility would reduce, and like Dr. Neil said, it wanted me to tell it whether it was still there or not. But that crowdsourcing part could, I guess, be a part of this too, but it's kind of like catastrophic. Once you get into one of these, it's pretty bad. It's not like, then everything starts to go haywire. I'm not sure where my question's going here, but we had these Waymo folks on last week. And it seems like one of the unintended consequences or benefits of what they're doing is that they have all these cars driving around that have these sensors on them, and they're ingesting huge amounts of information. And when we tried to get around anything proprietary with them, we couldn't get very far, but it seems like they're sitting on a wealth of information that could be useful in this process. And I would agree. I think I just shut the entire show down. Sorry, Neil. Go ahead.
I think there's a ton of useful information in there, and I mean, it wouldn't be the first time that the Weather Service would have bought proprietary private sector data and put redistribution restrictions on it if they were worried about IP. But the fact that they're pulling in all this information, plus they clearly have comms channels running to the cars because they're telling them where to go. It's all they got to do. They pretty much have solved the whole problem. And there's a lot of cars. Like pretty much anyone who has their phone connected to their car could be running data. I mean, there's smartphones with accelerometers in them. And for a while, there were some companies that were actually trying to detect aircraft turbulence for people's phones while they're on planes. And it actually worked. I don't know what you're going to do with that other than, automated PIREPs, but it's still a pretty cool technology.
Well, already your Apple Watch can detect if you are, if it thinks you were in an accident. So it looks like that information could be fed back and could be helpful if it were in certain places. I know maybe not on ski slopes, which are the where it's happening right now in roller coasters. James A shaking his head or nodding his head because he's probably heard the same story here in the last week, and that can be kind of a disruptive situation. But we're getting tons of information now that could be really useful. I want to know if that's happening ahead of me, whether it was just a tractor trailer or a snow squall or a fog, situation, any of these kind of deals. I want to know that when I'm in my car, because it affects me in a lot of different ways that can be, as you guys are talking about, life or death.
And Bill, one other thing we've learned through some conversations is that even the commercial truck traffic, they don't seem to be using the same radio frequencies to communicate. And so there's not sort of the in-between truck traffic communication that can happen sort of organically. And I don't know the reasons for that, but there's not sort of just the simple man's, hey, mile marker 122, we got whatever to be able to pass back. And so because the trucks aren't communicating with each other as effectively, you see the video, like I had sent an email and certainly can provide that information afterwards, of the dash cam where a truck's just bearing along. I don't know, even if it's 35 or 40 miles an hour trying to stop, can't, slams into the back of other trucks in front of it. You got people diving out of the way, and it can be, just horrifying. And so the communication and dissemination piece is a very difficult one that certainly the Weather Service by ourselves can't solve. We're going to continue to improve WEA, and I think Kim indicated she had a quick question on that. But I think it's got to be sort of an all systems approach to be able to get the information to the right people at the right time so that they can even be able to make the right decision. And we're just talking about getting the alert to them, not even how they respond to it, which it'd be interesting to talk about that too after this.
So John, you think we need to bring back CB radios from the 1970s? I guess the truckers are listening more to XM now than they are to CB radio.
Clearly, they had some benefit, I suppose.
Dr. Neal, you pointed out about our Waymo friends last week in LiDAR. Make that comment real quick. Then Kim's got a question, as John said.
I just got to thinking about like how cool it would be to just get like vertical profiles off vehicles. and for a while, I was like trying to push this idea that maybe we could put like SODARs or profilers on like UPS trucks or ships or something. But Waymo said I swear they said they had LiDAR, and I'm assuming it's pointed forward to make sure they don't run into anything, but they should get another one and just stick it on the roof and point it straight up and just get vertical profiles and send those in.
That is too funny. Well, you're in charge of getting that implemented, Dr. Neal. Kim,
someone will make a lot of money and then exactly. I won't see anything from it.
Oh man! So I asked this question out of complete ignorance with the WEA message content for the snow squall warning. What else included in it? Do you guys put in there like visibility reduced to zero? Like something like to indicate the nature of the problem.
Yes, I was actually part of the team. I think maybe Mike was too. That WEA message initially was kind of short and then it's expanded, but it includes, whiteout conditions, icy roads, delay travel or safely exit highway. All that stuff is like, this is what you need to know now. And I think, Kim, you touched on it before. A big challenge is on these interstates, you're getting people driving from locations, from down south. They don't know what a squall is, but they will get that WEA message. The challenge is how do they look at it? Is it safer to look at their phone than to drive into a pileup? I would say yes, but you're still taking your eyes away from the road. So it's not ideal, but I tell you, I'd rather have this problem than 10 years ago, us having to MacGyver it with rubber bands and carrier pigeons, trying to get the message out to people in their cars where they need it. We desperately needed a tool to do that, and we have that. And so we're going to keep, obviously, harnessing social science and everything we can think of to improve how we do it.
Well, this is just a fascinating conversation, and it dovetails well on what we were talking about last week. And I agree totally. It terrifies me that I would be in Pennsylvania without this information. It happened to me outside Pittsburgh back in, Lord, it was probably 1991 or so. We'd gone out with a group of colleagues and we're going back to the hotel, and I was the designated driver. They were all drunker than Cooter Brown. And I've never silenced a car of drunks better or more effectively than I did that night when I just turned around and said, does everyone have their seatbelts on? Because we got into one of these things, and thank goodness there was not a flash freeze, but just the reduction of visibility scared me so badly. I parked the rental car at the hotel and never moved it again the whole time we were there. So this is fascinating. So anyway, what else do we want to talk about here, panel? What other questions we have for the guys here about the snow squall warning, and then anything else we want to talk about Pennsylvania weather? Anybody?
Can you geofence those alerts to just major highways?
Yeah, how big do you draw the polygons?
The challenge there is you also want to catch people who are within, driving distance of the highway as they're maybe approaching a highway. So you don't want to limit it just to the highway itself, because then you'll miss those folks and they won't have the decision to make whether to delay their travel.
Oh, they should have been on time.
It has been suggested. Some people have suggested just limiting it to the highways, but we really do want to catch those people. A big game changer is being able to we can differentiate between the WEA alert and just a baseline snow squall warning that doesn't activate WEA. We had to be really careful with WEA because it is our only mass dissemination tool. These warnings cannot be EAS alerted. EAS, we would require us to get codes that would take several years actually to get implemented. So with great, this is great responsibility for us to manage this in a way that isn't ticking people off, but is informing and truly differentiating the deadly flash freeze snow squalls from ones that are a hazard but aren't the life-threatening ones with the flash freeze.
I think that the topic of polygonology is an interesting one as well, because we've had a lot of discussions as the snow squall warning product has been evolving. So too, I think, has our warning decision process, right? So with a tornado warning, you want to issue if there's a tornado, bar none, period, right? Like the tornado is going to create impacts, even if it's in the middle of a field. With a snow squall warning, it's a really interesting interface between the meteorology and the societal impacts piece. So a question to consider that I don't necessarily think we know the answer to, you could probably ask a bunch of us in the office and we have different opinions. Should you ever issue a snow squall warning for an area that does not include a highway? Like, would you ever issue a snow squall warning in farm fields in Ohio? Interesting question, right? Some would argue that no, you ought not, because there's not going to be any impacts. There's no risk of pileups. Some would say yes, just because people could be, driving even on side roads and could see reduced visibility. That's not straightforward. The other tool we have is a special weather statement. And before we, had the non-WEA alerting snow squall warning, people would do that. That was sort of the overnight version of the snow squall warning. Dissemination isn't as great. It doesn't get to as many people, but that's a useful technique, right? We've sort of talked about, could an SPS be used the morning of a broad area, sort of in place of a snow squall watch? Heads up, snow squall is possible today. Be alert for rapidly changing conditions. Maybe then you cast a wide net for, a baseline snow squall warning, not unlike a severe thunderstorm warning with a tornado possible tag. And then you do the wireless emergency alert activated snow squall warning for where there's actually impacts on the highway. I mean, these are conversations I think that are ongoing within the Weather Service as a whole, certainly within our office, that we don't necessarily understand quite yet. We are continuing to have conversations with our partners, our transportation partners, our emergency managers, things like that. I do think a gap exists in sort of our socially scientific understanding of how people perceive these things, and we're just starting with that with Joe Rittberger. But I'm fascinated to kind of hear thoughts, perspectives tonight, and even over the course of time, as we seek to collectively solve this polygonology problem. What's the best way? And I don't know that we have a big enough sample size to be able to answer that definitively for maybe an idealized circumstance.
Let me ask you this. It seems like we've got a gap in this alert between the WIA level and people not paying attention, so they're not going to get the message because it is an active decision to stay alert during weather. And this dovetails into what Kim does. This gap is present in nearly every other emergency messaging we have. And how do you cross the bridge of getting people's mindset to be actively seeking weather information before it's at that emergency level?
I think just a quick answer would just be, we want to convey the urgency with WIA. There's a spectrum of risk to the traveling person. But if you cry wolf for every single snow squall, you're going to lose them. We also, if we get enough complaints that we're overusing WIA for a snow squall in the middle of the night, or there is no flash freeze, so you just don't see the impact without the flash freeze. And so we're lucky that we can differentiate between those, and we use road weather information systems to see the surface temperature, the subsurface temperature, air temperature and dew point. So we're beginning to really hone in on that in a way that 10 years ago we really didn't have any promise of being able to do. So it's all evolving, of course. But you mentioned that gap between WIA, like a flash flood warning that is non-WIA alerted versus an emergency flash flood warning, which is life-threatening versus nuisance, I think is kind of is that gap. And that's the decision we're being paid to make. Our professional judgment, all the information that is at our disposal, and our experience and education. And so that's what we're trying to do to the best of our ability, and always improve in time.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like John and Greg alluded to. I mean, if you talk about symmetry back to warm season convective phenomenon like tornadoes and severe thunderstorms, we're going to issue the warning if there's if we think what we're seeing on radar and satellite and other data sets are going to produce a severe storm. There's going to be impacts, presumably, regardless of whether you're driving or sitting in your house. The really interesting thing about snow squalls is that if, almost regardless of the best technology to get the warning information to people who are driving and other things like that, if we can get good enough within our office and in our agency at getting the meteorology right, really looking at the road temperature data and getting an accurate portrayal, there's actually some mitigating things we can do to maybe prevent. Like, we're blessed. We have a great relationship with several of our PennDOT districts. And literally, we have a kind of a 24/7, 365 meeting that we can do with some of our transportation partners. So if we see a threat, we can literally get on this meeting and tell one of our districts, look, we think you guys are going to have a real problem on Interstate 80 in about 25 minutes between exit such and such and such and such. Can you get a salt truck out there? Can you get a cruiser out there to pace traffic? Da-dum. So that's kind of one interesting difference, I think, versus warm season warnings, is if we're really on it, there might be things we can do to actually mitigate the impact to drivers. So it's, the whole thing really is pretty fascinating.
I'm really interested in this question about how far you should take the impacts proposition. And when you're thinking about that fine line between something that's a nuisance and a threat to life, and this question about geo-targeting, we sort of hit this question also in the severe weather domain when we're thinking about the distinction between different impacts categories for tornado warnings. And this was hotly debated when those began. And as with that conversation, I'm finding myself in the same place with this one. I don't think that you should make it population density determined, because, and then the reason why is because there are plenty of people driving those rural roads that will face, different kinds of challenges, but still challenges from the snow squall that could be life-threatening. And you might not get the volume of deaths that you'll get in an interstate where you could have collision and mass collision be like a mass casualty concern. You're thinking about, the sort of in risk decision science, is like the catastrophic outcomes, or those like low probability, high consequence events. You're thinking about the tail, of the distribution as you're trying to think about what's the signal we're detecting from the background noise to where to throw down our warning threshold here. But don't count out rural people. And that's something that we hit up on in tornadoes as well. There's just this real preponderance of philosophy in the Weather Service that you really gotta, aim those warnings at the dense population centers. And it even used to be in the WDTD training to do so. And that has been peeled back now out of recognition of, impacts aren't just about counting a number of people who are affected in a certain way. It's that quality of experience is experienced by any person. And if you don't do that equally for all people, then you're implicitly disadvantaging some group of people based on, a population density measure. And so I think as you're thinking about it, and you're recognizing there isn't a perfect in any of this. You guys have done such a beautiful job tonight talking about the trade-offs among so many different things that you've considered. And as with so many things at risk, there isn't a perfect. There's just a line, and you sort of decide where you draw it. And I would just implore you to draw the line where it's an equitable thought for people who are in these various kinds of situations, but there's still people who could face a danger. It's a really interesting conversation, but that would be where I would come down on it.
Kim, I'm so glad you brought that up because it is a key point when you talk about frequency of these events. And just to give you an idea, we were talking about this just before the broadcast, John and I. Our most vulnerable areas are interstates. So I think when John earlier was talking about rural areas or our Northwest counties where we do not have interstates, and I'm just gonna make a joke here, we're not hearing about farm tractor pileups on these side roads. We're getting our impacts and our pileups on the interstates. And in our CWA, our warning area, a lot of the highways are central and southeast where the population is highest and where the frequency of squalls is lowest. And so that, in a tornado prone area, you'd probably think, that's a recipe for disaster because they're not experienced, they don't know what to do, they're not listening for it. That's what's happening in southeast Pennsylvania when you get a rarer event. You get a squall that reaches Harrisburg or southeastward, and you have the right air temperature, mid-20s. Suddenly, your pre-squall environment, road surface temperatures are 50, and you can get a flash freeze, and you have this heavy traffic volume. So you're dealing with it. It truly illustrates the impact-based nature of the warning. So truly, it's not just the population density, but it's the fact that that's the least frequent area for squalls. And because volume is one of the impact-based parameters, time of day, day of week, rush hour versus weekend, things like that. Because of that, it is a fascinating question. I'm so glad you brought it up. And the last thing is the beauty of having just a baseline baseline snow squall warning versus the WEA alerted snow squall warning is we can issue a snow squall warning for the rural areas without a WEA alert. Not scare people, because there's no reason to scare people who are on a side road and you're not going to have the tractors piling up. But you can warn for them, and you save the WEA alerts for the life-threatening impact with the high traffic volume and high-speed interstates.
So Michael and then John, any other response to Kim's thoughts, which are really valuable?
Yeah, Greg brings up some interesting points. I guess, his main point is that at least in terms of snow squalls, population density doesn't always equal, not always directly correlated to the threat on the roads. And if you envision a situation where the air is cold, the roadway is cold, not a lot of traffic volume on a particular road. It may snow heavily when a squall comes through for a few minutes. Maybe in that case, a lot of the snow blows across the road, or maybe the road is still snow covered, but it's just not quite as slippery. I think there's a lot of evidence to suggest when you have the higher volume of traffic, that's when you melt it through compaction and refreeze. And that's when you really get the dangerous ice layer under the snow. And then combined with the fact that you've got, trucks then going 75, 85 miles an hour, which you're not necessarily going to have on a 2-lane road. So these are all very fascinating questions to ponder. And we've gone around and around about a lot of this stuff.
And Michael, it comes down to you as the SUE to train all the forecasters in the office on all these different variables. So does that become a factor in scheduling for the office when you've got folks that are more expert at this, or how does that work?
It really does sometimes. I mean, to be equitable, we've got everyone who's got to rotate through the shifts and work their schedules. But I think there's a lot to be said for putting people and their office in the best position to succeed. So at any given time, you're maybe going to have a subset of the staff that is really skilled at that. And of course, the goal is always to train everyone out the best we can, but we want to put people in this position to succeed. And so we do think about that.
The last little piece I'll jump in on, something I've been wrestling with really just the last 12 hours or so. I had a meeting with Joe Ritberger today, and the thing that continually is in my mind when it comes to snow squall warnings is not wanting to over warn people, making sure that we don't have this sort of cry wolf syndrome and we don't annoy people with the WEA so that people turn it off. And I'm beginning to wonder if my personal bias towards overwarning is maybe overinflated to some extent, because one of the things that Joe was saying and consistently in the research, I guess, is that people don't tend to feel like we issue too many warnings, right? Like I think overnight snow squall warning that's WEA alerted that wakes people up at their houses, that's a problem, right? Like people are going to get annoyed, they're grumpy that it's waking them up. But during the day, I think I personally probably have a little bit too much concern about overwarning when people tend to really just appreciate that. And I think just broader perspective, I would be very curious for some more social science research to kind of understand and quantify people's perceptions, people's responses, like what's going through people's heads with these. Because we at our office and even with you guys have bounced around these ideas a lot. We've thought through them a lot. Most people haven't spent this much time, not much time at all, actually thinking about these things. And so I'd just be really fascinated to understand that a little bit more so that I can not be biased by my over immersion in these topics, right? It's really easy to overthink it. And so I'm fascinated to continue conversation just like this to get perspective for those that maybe haven't thrown these things around nearly as much.
Is there any research that differentiates false alarm perception by hazard type?
Yeah, that's something that Joe is aiming to do now, and something that John is referring to on the perceptions of overwarning, underwarning. They just did a little piece on severe thunderstorm warning perceptions, and there's this widespread belief in our field we just douse people in these things. They must feel overwarned, and their survey showed that it was like this an enormous majority, not even like a little bit. It was like 90% of people or more said, yep, it's about the right amount of severe thunderstorm warnings. Like you warn it when we think it's severe, and they're just our warnings. Like they don't think very much of it at all. The thing that's really interesting about the snow squall warning, Joe in his survey is able to measure like sort of a latent belief because it's something that is experienced. Like you're measuring something that exists in the world and people are accustomed to, so you're able to get like a set of attitudes or beliefs about a thing that actually exists. The thing about the snow squall warning, if he's going to be trying to measure something about frequency and false alarming, it's going to be people imagining what that might be like, and because they haven't experienced it very much yet. So there could be results from that could appear different from what ultimately materializes. And I would just encourage you to take it as guidance, but also recognize that there's a need with social science as we're introducing new products and bringing them online. We need to be doing longitudinal analysis to gauge how things are being adopted and responded to as we implement them. And this is one of the big reasons why people are terrible forecasters of their future judgments, because you're not embedded in the situation. You're taking the survey, sitting at your computer, perhaps with a glass of wine, as one does when they're answering surveys for payment. And you could just not at all be thinking about the situational impediments and challenges that you'll face in these real situations. And if you're waking people up, with WEAs in the middle of the night for snow squalls, that would definitely make people really irritated. So part of it is going to be about the implementation strategy, John. Everything you were just talking about, I think, is very wise and just as important as anything else we've talked about. Just as important as what you call it, as having the content of the WEA include some of those, hazard specifics that let people know there is a thing worth responding to here. Help them, calibrate their judgment. It just how you do it is just as important as what you do. So I'll put that out there with just all those caveats. We don't know, James, about this hazard space, and we'll maybe get some guesses from Joe's survey, but what's really valuable about what Joe does is that they can do this year after year, and we'll get that time series, and that's the thing to really watch.
Yeah, and Kim, that's what she says is really true. Just, the way a person answers a survey doesn't guarantee that's how they're going to react when they're faced with a situation, but something, and granted, it's early in the game, like Kim said, and it's not a huge sample size, but in talking with Joe today, just some initially things that kind of excited us is what Joe was able to do with this, some of these initial snow squall surveys that were sent out to a pretty broad cross-section of people across the country. He was able to kind of break it down by who was familiar with what a squall is versus those that aren't. He was able to compare different areas, and there's at least some very cursory evidence to suggest that people in our neck of the woods here in Pennsylvania, who would have been the most likely to hear in some way, shape, or form the outreach campaign that we've been trying to drum up here, that they had a little bit more knowledge as to the right behaviors to take if they were faced with this on a highway versus those people who were familiar with squalls still in other areas. So it's really early, and we'll see how the numbers shake out. But that was kind of a cool result, which maybe would suggest that at least people are hearing what we're saying, and maybe they can internalize it over time.
Yeah, can I tell a really funny story? I know, Bill, we've got to move on, but can I tell a really funny story about the non-adapted versus adapted people? It's personal. It's me and my husband. So I'm from the Great Lakes. I'm from just south of Lake Michigan. So I'd get the fetch off of the lake, and we'd get lake effect snow that was real, and you grow up with that, and you know what a snow squall is, and you know how bad it can be and what the appropriate action to take is, because, oh man. But Patrick grew up in Oklahoma and Houston, Texas, no idea. And I took him home to Indiana, I think the year before we got married. And we were in Chicago and looking to go into Indiana. And I looked at the radar and I just said, this is maybe not the best time. I mean, I'm comfortable driving in these conditions, but I don't know if you would feel comfortable with me driving in them. And Patrick said, I'd really like to drive through lake effect snow. I think this would be really fun. Okay, all right, but you're going to listen to me as we do this. And we get past Oprah's house. That's, with the natives, we sort of know that that's about 30 miles in Indiana. And then we hit the snow, and he couldn't see a thing. You can't see anything. And I was navigating where the side of the road was. And I was like, this was just such a terrible idea. I should really be the one driving. And there was a snowplow that came by. And if you're from the area, being behind the snowplow is the right way to go. And I just told him, get behind that thing. And I know it's going really slowly, but that's what we're going to do for the next hour and a half. And it took forever. And we got through that. He was white knuckling it the whole time. And he was just like, I never want to do that again. And, but he had no idea. he had no idea what it was. And so part of it is, I think you are seeing people who live in that area who've seen it. Yeah, if any vague allusion to it, so you do have that going into this, that you've got the people who are most exposed most often. Yeah, you've got them. What's going to be really interesting is getting the Okies. That'll be fun. So sorry, with that, Bill, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else from the panel before we turn it over to James Fan for the hard questions?
I think John had one more comment. Go, John.
Yeah, one last thought that sort of ties in nicely with this is the low-hanging fruit that I think we can act on, we're actively trying to, is that people don't know what they should do once they're caught in a pileup. It was horrifying, March 28th, 2022, to see these videos where people are standing outside their vehicles passively, because that's what you do when you get into an accident. And that's literally the worst place you can be. One of the dash cams, you had a semi coming in and you see somebody dive out of the way. We weren't sure if they made it. Come to find out that they did, because nobody was killed by being run over. Somebody else standing next to their vehicle, another car comes and hits the vehicle and it spins right around them, missing them by literally inches. And so that's an area where, independent of if they get the warning, if they did the right thing before that, we feel like that's a low-hanging fruit opportunity for us to partner with Pennsylvania State Police and to get the word out of, like, don't do what you normally would do. And the other, I think, issue with that, Kim, is that, like, people haven't experienced the snowfall pileup before, or they wouldn't be in it. If they've experienced it, they're not driving through that thing again. And so it's not like a snow shower. People have no concept of what this is. They're stressed. There's all sorts of factors where people are just hysterical. And so trying to cut through the noise and focus in on that to ideally mitigate the number of deaths that occur in a pileup, knowing we're not going to mitigate all the pileups, that's sort of an area of focus. It's going to take time and energy and effort, but I think that's a success from our observed experience in March 28th, 2022, is building out some more content on that front to try to encourage people not to do literally the worst possible thing, which is standing outside their vehicle as cars are bailing into the pileup. So great insights. Thank you all so much for throwing this around with us. And it's been a blast working on it the last few years, and excited for what's going to be coming down the pike here.
It's been a great discussion, and we're going to have to take a quick break here, but let me just remind everybody, before the show is over, we're going to go to everybody for a pick of the week, something weather-related, so be thinking. But in the meantime, we're going to take a break here. We're going to go to Tony Rice and his astronomy report. We've got Jen and This Week in Tornado History. We're going to come back with an email segment. Bruce Jones, our friend from Midland Radio, is back on the show. We're going to talk with Bruce, and then we'll come back with the picks of the week and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Jupiter recently retook its crown as the king of the solar system, at least when it comes to moons. An additional 12 Jovian moons have been added to the Minor Planet Center's published orbits, in addition to the 80 that were already there. This pulls Jupiter ahead of Saturn's 83 confirmed moons. Now, these new moons are pretty small, between 3 and 8 kilometers across, and they're really far out, taking nearly an Earth year to complete an orbit. Several are in retrograde orbit, meaning they're moving in the opposite direction of all the other moons, which probably means they're the result of colliding asteroids, which were then captured by Jupiter's massive gravity. Unlike the larger, more interesting Galilean moons, Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto, which were probably formed in place. Jupiter's position on top of the moon podium may be short-lived, though. As Sky and Telescope magazine points out, there's a lot of objects around 3 kilometers across which have been discovered around Saturn, but they've yet to be tracked well enough to determine their orbits, and if they are moons of that ring planet or not. But as instruments improve, this could change. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, the Super Tuesday outbreak started during the evening of February 5th and continued through the early morning of February 6th, 2008. A total of 24 tornadoes occurred on the 6th. 2 EF4 tornadoes crossed through parts of northern Alabama. One pushed through parts of Lawrence and Morgan counties, and the other in Jackson County. This EF4 began near the Pisgah area and traveled 10.9 miles, ending 1 mile southeast of Flat Rock. The National Weather Service determined that maximum winds were near 180 miles per hour. The most significant damage was at the corner of County Road 60 and 177 between Pisgah and Rosalie. It was in this area that a fatality occurred. 60-year-old Linda Tinker, who had lost her husband just 2 years before the tornado, lived alone in her Pisgah home. She was thrown 300 yards from the residence. The National Weather Service noted that along the path, numerous trees were snapped and, quote, in some cases were shredded. Several homes were swept from their foundations, and large hay bales weighing 2,500 pounds were thrown or blown apart. We are working on an update to our summary about this event at tornadotalk.com. Calling all weather enthusiasts, join the AMS Weather Band and become part of the American Meteorological Society, whose members have been at the forefront of weather, water, and climate research for over 100 years. You'll get to go behind the scenes with the 10,000 plus scientists, broadcasters, educators, and researchers of the AMS. The AMS Weather Band brings together weather professionals and weather enthusiasts. Band members can grow their knowledge and appreciation of weather and climate by participating in virtual events, online discussions, Q&As, AMAs, webinars, photo contests, and more. AMS Weather Band gives you the opportunity to interact directly with those in the scientific community. Learn more and join the band today at amsweatherband.org.
All right. Time to dig into the email inbox and just maybe there's something to read this week.
We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All righty. So this WeatherBrains email segment brought to you by the Nittany Lion, and was wanted to thank our folks who have given some suggestions for guests. Thank you to Jeremy Bauer and Richard Cook. And also James, I'm going to actually read your email here in just a second. James Lewis also gave us some suggestions. So I know that Bill's getting those in. But James Lewis wrote to us today and had just some comments about how people react to tornadoes. How many people do take action, but take what might be considered half measure? So for example, someone might be in a mobile home and not evacuating, but get under a piece of sturdy furniture instead. Or if someone's in a site-built home, they go into an interior room, maybe versus going into the basement. Is there any statistics on that half measure type thing?
I'll just say one of the things that's challenging about this question is we do a really poor job of sampling after events in general. So especially a representative set of events. So not just the EF4s, EF5s, generational outbreaks. I mean, that's really where things get studied. And it's not going to be representative of 98% of the tornadoes that occur. So we're trying to shore up our observations after real choices are made. The Joe Ripberger survey is a really wonderful gauge of the things people think they would do. There are some studies like from Vortex Southeast that have tried to go in and look at mobile home dwellers versus permanent home dwellers and do some compare contrast. But again, it's small sample stuff. The bottom line is we don't know yet, but hopefully soon we'll know the answer to stuff like that. It's a good question.
Yeah. Another question that has to do with tornadoes, and this is a reaction to show 888. This was from Steve Holmes. He was asking, we tell people to go shelter. Do we ever tell them to go to someplace fun? And, versus, at a safe room or whatever, can we have them go to the mall or, whatever? I know I've asked people, if you're traveling you're on the highway, get off, go to a sturdier shelter, go into a restaurant or, whatever, go into a safer place. But I don't know where we would send them. Buc-ee's, that's a very good answer. I guess Wesley's Booby Trap has been mentioned before, but you're just kind of using that as a landmark spot. I don't know.
I never told anybody
to go in there. Okay.
To go into Wesley's. Okay. That didn't happen.
Just checking. Just clarifying that you did not make that as a suggestion. I'm just kidding. Back in January, Jay Farlow mentioned that a social meteorologist issued their own winter storm watch. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. That doesn't mess up the messaging at all to have that going on. So thank you for sharing those things with us, Jay. So everybody, thank you so much for sending us email at weatherbrains.com for all of your guest suggestions and comments on the show. We really love seeing it. We try to get to them as much as we can. And sometimes we're able to actually get back to you when you write too. So we try to do that too. And don't forget to sign up for our newsletter that gets into your email every Thursday morning. Back to you, Stan.
And back to Bill Murray.
Back to Bill Murray.
And it's interesting that tonight that we're talking about this fabulous warning product. Bruce Jones joins us from Midland Weather Radio. Bruce, welcome back to the show. It's nice to have Midland own as a partner again this year for severe weather season. And of course, we were talking earlier about how valuable NOAA Weather Radio is. And I assume that the snow squall warning is a part of NOAA Weather Radio's warning process, right?
Yeah, it is. And, John gave a wonderful presentation at the AMS conference, the American Meteorological Society conference in Denver just about a month ago. And he was showing that very dramatic footage of the cars piling into each other, the trucks, the 18-wheelers. And I made the comment that we've still not been able to get Detroit to put NOAA Weather Radio in all the cars, despite the fact that the actual little chip that produces NOAA Weather Radio inside of a radio only costs about $1.25 for that little chip. So I've often wondered what we could do to spur and encourage Detroit to put NOAA Weather Radio in the cars, so at least you could just push one button very quickly and get the latest broadcast. But that's on my wish list, my dream list of things that I want to see Detroit do.
Well, Bruce, we know you've been busy since we talked to you last. Any exciting news to talk about in the world of weather radio over the past 6 months or so?
Well, yeah, actually, we're working on something for the Amish, and it's not a wooden weather radio, but it is a handmade
show
wooden
title.
weather radio. But the Amish population, yeah, a lot of them live without electricity, and they're living in an era that's similar to the 1800s when you had no warning whatsoever of a tornado, other than what you saw with your own eyeballs. And this is a very underserved and very vulnerable population. They're very rural. They're out on their own, on their farms. A lot of them live in flash flood zones in Kentucky, Tennessee, Southern Ohio. And so they're really at risk. And we've been working on developing a NOAA Weather Radio that's acceptable to the Amish community. We came up with some prototypes that were presented to the Amish and some of their national leaders, and they were very enthusiastic about it. So we're working on this project. I'm hoping to bring it to fruition sometime maybe later this year. There are some difficulties, a few little extra things that we have to do to accommodate the Amish, and a few little things we have to take out, put in, et cetera, et cetera. But it's an exciting concept, and I feel so badly for any family that doesn't get warnings. It's a scary thing to be in when you're in a bad situation and you don't know exactly how bad it is, when it's going to hit, or when it's going to be over. So we're working on that.
Yeah.
John Bangum's got a comment there, and then I'm gonna come back to you. Troy, you go ahead, and then I'll come back to John.
I'm just going to tie this into Bruce, and I don't think Bruce knows this. I think the WeatherBrains group does, because I think I sent it out in email. But Bruce, we got word late this afternoon during the winter storm. WXK 5727 went down here in Austin, NOAA Weather Radio. Unfortunately, we got the bad news late this afternoon that a downed smaller tower, not the tower that NOAA Weather Radio is on, but a smaller old FM tower did collapse in the ice in the antenna farm, and it has taken out all the communication wiring for Austin Weather Radio from the National Weather Service, Austin, San Antonio. PNS at 4:30 this afternoon from the Weather Service now tells us that this will be a long-term outage. And they've told us that that's it for weather radio in Austin, at least for the time being. It's just another one of the insults on injury, but we so much depend on weather radio here. But when it went down, I guess it went down Thursday when the icing got bad. We thought the Weather Service called me. We checked the reception and it wasn't there, but we were just hoping it was icing. And it ends up it was more than that. So I thought I'd let you know that, Bruce.
Well, thank you. I had not heard about that, Troy, and I'm sorry to hear about it.
Yep.
You know, the cell phone companies have those mobile cell towers, the cell tower on wheels. I think they call them cows.
Yeah.
Where in the event of a Hurricane Katrina or something like that, they can bring these things in and they just crank them up and the antenna goes up and they've got a generator on there, and it's a low power cell phone tower, but at least it fills in holes in the coverage area on a short-term basis. There's a company in Australia that makes some really cool ones that are much higher power. And I suggested years ago that the National Weather Service have some of those for weather radio use, where you could have a transmitter, basically weather radio transmitter, on a portable little trailer and take it out and raise the antenna and continue broadcasting. Unfortunately, that costs money. And you know how National Weather Service and every other government entity is always tight for money, always looking for something extra. So maybe we can do that someday.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. Thanks for telling us.
We were laughing about, making an Amish weather radio out of wood, but talk about some of the real serious weather outreach programs that your office is involved in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't anticipate talking about Amish stuff tonight on the show, but it's another joy of mine. I mean, I absolutely love it. A lot of people don't realize that during the spring planting season, we average about 5,000 phone calls from Amish each day. They rely heavily on our phone recordings, and we've adapted the phone recordings to include a whole bunch more information on them. Prior to doing so, at times we would have 70 to 80 calls in an hour to an hour and a half window in the morning. It's ringing off the hook. It's really annoying to get the same exact question. It's like, come on, people, what's the deal, right? And so to that end, we've really been trying to up our forecast information on the phones, but also do outreach and education, because as we've sort of described it, they're a vulnerable population. Now, it's self-imposed, right? Which leads some people to say, hey, this is your fault. But at the end of the day, there's a big need here. And so we have a relationship with Lancaster County, which has a significant Amish population, probably one of the biggest in the entire country. We're going to be going down at the end of this month for an Amish Farm and Family Safety Days event. We've gotten in touch with the Amish Safety Committee down there. That includes healthcare folks. That includes Department of Transportation. There's an Amish buggy driving manual to kind of educate the Amish. So all sorts of really fascinating stuff. Would love to come on with folks from the Jackson, Kentucky, and the Paducah office with the Weather Awareness for a Rural Nation, the WARN initiative. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're actually working on putting together a proposal for the National Weather Association annual meeting in Kansas City. I have dreams of riding out with my buddy Amos Lapp and his Amish buggy from State College to Kansas City, so everybody can get the full spectacle. Man, the Amish have a near and dear place to my heart, and super appreciate the work that Bruce has done to help us connect with them in the midst of some of the limitations, right? Because they don't have websites, they don't really have cell phones. A lot of them do have black boxes or phones outside their house where they can still get information. And so we're looking at automatic notification when they're in a polygon for a severe thunderstorm warning to at least say a warning's in effect for them. But all sorts of neat stuff that will continue to grow through the course of this spring and summer. And again, love the Amish and developed some really cool relationships with them over the past couple of years.
And they're really good communicators too. You know, we think nowadays with their cell phones and all this other stuff, oh, we're communicators. The Amish are the best communicators. It's all verbal. It's interpersonal verbal communication, which is the best way to spread messages. You know, they get together in groups and they talk and they spread this from family to family, from group to group. It's just a fantastic group of people, and I'm looking forward to working with National Weather Service to help them.
I have to interject here. They're really good at communicating our office's phone number. So we get people calling us from Indiana, Illinois. These aren't just all local to Pennsylvania. Like our number was published regionally, nationally. So the mouth agape for the number of calls. Yeah, they communicate pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is amazing. Jen Evermore, you got to comment real quick.
And John, if you get on that Amish buggy and you head to Kansas City, you're my new weather hero. I'm kicking the
You've been kicked to the curse, man.
I swear I'm talkative, but one last little thing. Have you guys ever seen the show Breaking Amish? Anyways, it's this show where the Amish like leave their community. They go to like New York City or Los Angeles or something like that. And it's like documenting their entire process of the real world. I would love to be cast in Breaking English where I go and be Amish for a couple weeks and they film me as I'm doing that. I think it would be absolutely incredible. And so if you got any connections with any producers for Netflix or whatever, definitely let me know and I can make that happen.
Coming soon to a streaming service near you. That's for
Yes.
sure. Well, Bruce, we know we're going into the dangerous season for a lot of folks. Talk about how you've got a special offer for WeatherBrains listeners. I guess still in effect this year. I assume it is. If
It
not,
is.
maybe you can change it on the fly.
No,
But
no.
talk about how they can get a special deal because they're WeatherBrains listeners.
Yeah. If you'll go to midlandusa.com, if you have a weather radio already, that's fantastic. I would ask that you think about other members of your family. Maybe you have a grandmother, grandfather, mom, dad, maybe someone in your family is getting married. You know, a weather radio actually makes a pretty nice wedding present, and they'll really appreciate it once they, you know, kind of start building a home and having a family. But we've got a 25% off offer for every WeatherBrains listener / viewer. If you go to midlandusa.com and use the promo code SPAN25, SPANN25, SPAN25 is the promo code. And if you'll use that at midlandusa.com, you get 25% off all the weather products and accessories. So we have the hand crank radios, the SAME radios where you can tell it what county you live in, but it's a 25% off offer if you're a fan of WeatherBrains. And again, if you have a weather radio already, thank you so much for doing that for yourself and for your family. But think about getting these things for others because they do make great gifts. And I've always believed that every home should have a NOAA weather radio. It's the official voice of the National Weather Service.
And do us a favor, be an evangelist here. You might have one, but your neighbors probably don't. Your friends probably don't. I'm still shocked, Bruce, and how many people don't have a weather radio that live in tornado-prone areas of the country and other hazards. So it's a wonderful time. It's a 25% discount. It's a great time to do that. So please help us, and let's get weather radios in every home, and not just homes, but every business. Every business needs one. So great to have you back, Bruce. So we're going to go around here, do picks of the week really quickly. So let's go right to Dr. Neil Jacobs, who has a marvelous pick, I'm sure, for us this week. Go, Neil.
So my pick of the week is this crazy video from, I think it's a Coast Guard helicopter, of this ship that gets caught in a wave. And have you seen this? They've got a Coast Guard swimmer that is in the water, and the ship gets completely flipped over, and there's one guy on the ship and he gets thrown off. This wave's like 30-40 feet tall. And the swimmer swims over and gets the guy and saves him. But it's the craziest video I think I've seen in months. And it was this first swimmer's rescue. I don't know how you train for that stuff, but this was pretty impressive.
Wow. All right. And again, for those that are new here, all these picks will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Let's see, James A., before you got to go do some news, what's your pick of the week?
Mine is a seismograph from a station in Tulsa, just southwest of Tulsa, of the seismic waves going around from the magnitude 7.8 catastrophic earthquake in Turkey yesterday evening. And most of the seismographs, if you find them online, and I put that link on there if you can pop into the southeastern US ones, but you can see that the seismic energy going around, and it takes several hours for it to die back down after such a shock like that. The Chilean earthquake several years ago did the same thing.
Wow. And that was what, a 7.8?
Yeah.
The biggest one. I mean, they've had so many. Goodness.
I think it's 7.5 aftershock too. Terrible.
Wow, that's insane. All right, Jen, what do you have for us this week? Go.
So a couple of years ago, I wrote a small summary on an event that happened February 4th, 1971. It was about 3 weeks before the Delta outbreak, and it was in Gore Springs, Mississippi. And I was taken by this because the tornado was small and it didn't do a lot of damage, but what the damage it did do was catastrophic, and it hit a trailer, and 7 members of one family were killed, and they were the family of a police officer, a Grenada City police officer. We were able to find that police officer today. And a few weeks ago, I actually interviewed him and put some of his quotes into the summary. And I was overwhelmed by him. He had a very amazing story. It was hard. He really had not shared some of those details. And this was over 50 years ago. And we were honored that he spoke with us. And so I wrote some of his quotes out. The story is, the way he shared it is very a Job story. He's an amazing man, and I was very honored to speak with him. So I wanted to share that summary.
Excellent. Again, that'll be up on weatherbrains.com. Troy Kimmel, what do you got for us this week?
Had kind of three things in related to Austin, all weather related. Of course, the last couple of days, the winter storm, AP story that came out kind of summed it up pretty well, Associated Press story, in addition to a Daily Mail story that had to do, of course, with the just that close to disaster out at Austin Bergstrom International Airport at about 6:30 on Saturday morning. Folks, that's going to be really interesting to watch. NTSB's already in town, and we'll see those, at least some initial information come out about it. Visibility that morning, by the way, was about a quarter to eighth of a mile. The contract weather observers at the airport, part of the FAA, reporting freezing fog at the time. And so there was no tower cab visibility of the runway or anything else, but it came close. And as I pointed out at the top of the show, people I'm talking to in Washington said this would be basically a Tenerife all over again, which was 44 years ago. The only difference was at Tenerife, I think 582, 82 or 28 people, if over 500 people were killed there. In this case, it would have been probably close to 130 or so, but really pretty amazing event. My initial pick came about a week ago, and I know, Kim, we had kind of talked about this, out of the New York Times, and Matt Ritchell wrote an article the 18th day of January that was based on the AMS Denver meeting about some of the buzzwords that we have become so fond of lately, like atmospheric rivers and bomb cyclones. And basically the article is very good. Matt does a very good job with it, questioning whether we're really helping ourselves with these very complicated terms. Does the public get it? And stuff like this. So a really good article. And that will be, I hope, Bill, on the PDF, which I got out of the New York Times, is what I sent. And hopefully we'll have that as my pick of the week.
Good deal. All right, Kim, what you got for us this week?
Well, based on the conversation today, my pick of the week is going to be the Weather and Society dashboard that reports out the data from the surveys that you guys were talking about, Joe Ripberger and his team here at the University of Oklahoma. The stuff that is available is in, I think, severe and tropical, but winter weather is coming, and they're working all the time to add even more stuff. So check it out.
We will do. All right, John, we have stalled long enough. I know that you have a wonderful pick of the week for us, so go.
So I'm going to shout out our weather.gov/CTP/snowsquall page, which has all of the content that we didn't really talk a ton about, the actual Snow Squall Awareness Week content, which spells out science, communication, and safety. And I think really gives a comprehensive look at the state of snow squall science. I think that's probably a good supplement to the conversations that we've had so far tonight.
Awesome. Great. Good deal. And for those that are not watching, for those that are listening, John has the best hair in the Weather Enterprise. I mean, if I had that kind of hair, I mean, I might be a good looking guy. I don't know. All right, Greg.
He gets on the well coiffed WeatherBrains Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah. And he's probably got no product in there. It's just natural. It just looks like that. So there you go. All right. Greg, what you got for us? Give us a good pick of the week. Go.
You know, it's very timely. There's a video from Beloit, Wisconsin. I believe it was last Friday. They were under a winter weather advisory, but they had a break in the warm advection, a period of an hour where there was no snow, and then a convective line snow squall moved through. Flash freeze, pile up, and there's a cell phone video from, I believe, a Spanish truck driver of the pile up as it's happening. And he's talking to people, telling people, don't get out of your cars. It's perfect for this discussion and ripe for how we can try to improve our messaging.
That's awesome. And again, these case studies, people can relate to that. They can see that, and it means something to them. So that's great. And again, we'll put it up on weatherbrains.com. All right, Michael, go. What you got for us?
Okay, I'm going to shout out our transportation partners. So the different states like PA 511 and the roadway information systems, these sensors that we get real-time road surface data, and you can do these cool graphs and go back and look at past events and help us correlate the atmosphere to the transportation industry. And we couldn't do what we do without their help. So,
yeah, no, that's awesome. And again, I've had no training in my life on forecasting road conditions, ice accretion on roads, and the things I've learned from some of these people. It's been extremely helpful. So that's a great shout out. All right, Bruce, welcome back. Give us a good pick. I know you got something good.
Oh, yeah. I went down into the archives here, and this is from Leslie's Weekly Illustrated. And this is the St. Louis tornado of May 27, 1896, as it crossed the Mississippi River from St. Louis, Missouri, over to East St. Louis, Illinois. And in the background back there, you see the Eads Bridge. Now, the Eads Bridge is still across the Mississippi River. 800 tons of this bridge were removed by this F4 tornado, 800 tons of it. And that was also the bridge where some of the steel lattice work, a 2x4 actually penetrated the steel lattice work. So I don't know, the way, nowadays they look back on it and say, well, it was F4. I don't know. Some of that damage in that St. Louis tornado of 1896 was catastrophic, but this is the old Leslie's Weekly Illustrated. And I sent the photo to Bill Murray, so he'll be able to post it for you.
Awesome. And Harold Brooks tells a great story about that tornado too. But anyway, Bill Murray, let's go to you. We're a little late here, but it's been a great show. Go, Bill.
Yeah, it's even better when he tells it over a good plate of Italian food on the hill.
Yeah,
for sure. My pick of the week, because I've been inspired by Bruce Jones and our guest tonight, Greg DeVore. You'll appreciate this. This is the 45th anniversary today of the great blizzard of 78 that you were referring to earlier. Is that still the greatest snowstorm of record for Boston, Greg, or has that been passed? And you're muted. So we got the required you're muted in by the FCC.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has been superseded. It's number 2 as far as accumulation goes, but as far as impact, I think if you talk to locals up there, it's still number 1.
So I'm going to be competing with Bruce all season long on who can bring the best piece of weather memorabilia out. This is from 1966, the Topeka tornado. Bruce, see if you can top that next week. We'll pull that out around June the 8th if you're still hanging around with us by then. But James, next week we've got the Pathfinders folks on with us. That's going to be a fun show. And kind of continuing the same discussion that we had last week, Paul Pisano will be joining us. And from the AMS Weather Band, our other fabulous sponsor, Gideon Alligato, will be the guest panelist. So they've got some really cool stuff coming up over at the Weather Band. And Gideon will clue us in on all that coming up next week here on WeatherBrains.
Awesome. So John, Greg, Michael, anything else we need to plug on your end before we wrap it up? Any local plugs, anything else?
I guess I'll take the chance to plug the Ohio State Severe Weather Symposium. I think it's got a slightly different name now, but that's Friday, 9 to 5. If you search that on Google, you'll be able to find it. James Spann and others will be speaking, open to anybody. It'll be virtually and in person in Columbus. So definitely encourage you to check that out. Put on by the Ohio State Meteorology Club.
Awesome. Well, guys, thank you all. It's been a really, really, really good show here. It's almost when you don't want to stop, but we must stop. It's been marvelous. If you are new here, WeatherBrains is produced once a week, typically Monday nights, 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. Some folks watch the YouTube version, youtube.com/WeatherBrains, but we know most of you listen. However you consume the show, we're thankful for that. If you want to get in touch with us, our email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. So on behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thank you for listening. Have a great week and God bless. Thanks, everybody. Great show.
Thanks, y'all. Great show.
Thank you all.
Excellent.
That was great.
Excellent.
See you.
Hey,
Thanks,
I wanted to
everybody.
fit this in, but I held off.
Yeah.
John,
Go.
John, I didn't want you to feel bad. You didn't know that Ohio State had a meteorology major. We here at the office didn't know they had a meteorology major until you got hired. So don't feel too bad.
Do we know it yet?
Yeah.
You know my plate. Just keep me in your thoughts and prayers, please, for the day-to-day struggle.
Yeah.
I have a feeling you can do
Thank
that as well as
everybody.
you can take it there, John.